council member is. In many ways, are just as important to us as the county executive is. These are the people that root for us and work for us. So the folks that are here from Poolesville, enjoy getting the chance to meet these guys tonight, and we want you to put your best foot forward, best vote forward after you get a chance to see what we have going on. Those online as well, and we know you're going to help us all make the best decision for who is going to be working with us come November. Thank you, and thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you, Lake. So my name is Jeff Eck. I'm one of the commissioners along with Jim here in Poolesville. And I'm standing in for Tom Kettler this evening, so he gave me a few notes. Tom's out of town. He sends his regards. Sorry, my back is here. The Poolesville Area Chamber of Commerce is indeed pleased to host the at-large county council candidate forum. The Chamber of Commerce, the Poolesville Area Chamber of Commerce is now 43 years old, having been established in 1979. We have 135 members and growing. Oh, and also the prop here I have. The new directory, the business and community directory. I don't know if Kathy's in the room, but Kathy Butt from the Chamber of Commerce also works here at the town hall. Did a great job organizing, and a little bit like chasing cats to get all the directories in there, all the ads for the directory in there and whatnot. But it worked out very well. But I want to particularly say welcome back to Scott Goldberg, to Mr. Candidate Duando, and the candidate Albernas. They've been to Poolesville before, and that counts a lot for us. So thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, also, if you have a question, I have the question cards here. I'll bring you a card, and then I would give it to Lake, and he'll organize the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So this is a lot of people for a debate, and so initially we're going to do 2 minutes, but if you wouldn't mind, if we do a minute and a half opening comments, then a minute for each question. We have a nice timer over here, Adam Soroka. He's nice in the sense that he's a nice guy, but he has a stop sign. You'll hold it up, and it does say stop. So hopefully we'll be able to have a good discussion that way. The other thing I'll mention is if you are mentioned by another candidate or criticized by name, I'll certainly have a 30-second rebuttal if you want to use that. All you do is say, hey, I think he mentioned me, I'd like to comment, that's fine too. One other thing I'll mention is we're streaming it now. We had real trouble. We got hit by lightning. New servers put in. We have a camera that's working. It's streaming now, but unfortunately, we were not able with this camera to really set it up the way you should. And so it's actually flipped. Both you guys are flipped, and also the words are flipped. So fair access, nothing's can be read by people online, and your names can't either. Because always say instead of Albernas, it's sort of Ball or something. Anyway, we'll just have to live with that. But then you guys can be heard and you can be seen. That's the main thing. So let's start with the king. I will also alternate answers. So I will not have the first person always the same person answer the question. I'll alternate it. So let's go ahead with opening statements, and we'll start with Scott. If you want to start, 1.5 minutes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. So my name is Scott Goldberg. It is a pleasure to be here. I just want to tell kind of 2 stories. One, I live in Silver Spring, and our district is a high school named Northwood High School. So for many years, like your high school, it has been scheduled to have a wholesale renovation and to be redone. But this year it was delayed another year. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 is today is June 23rd, which for me is an anniversary. So 36 years ago, when I was a lot smaller, I was almost 4 years old, I had open heart surgery. So the whole kit and caboodle to repair a congenital defect at a hospital in New York City. I say those 2 things because I feel a lot of what Poolesville has been going through. I know you guys don't have the medical care and primary care physicians that we do in other parts of the county and other parts of the country. And I know that you have waited a long time for your high school to be done. So I just want to sympathize, empathize, feel your pain, and know that there are going to be challenges in the future. And I feel those same things. I feel like a bond with you guys. Thank you.
Randy?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandy Brooks. I am an environmental justice and food systems organizer and consultant living in Kensington. And part of what that means is that from the first time that I moved here in Montgomery County, I was incredibly excited about the agricultural reserve because it is so rare across the country to have in a single jurisdiction such well-preserved rural and agricultural areas combined with strong urban and suburban markets for food products and a community full of wisdom and skill and knowledge about processing and food production that will bring that all together. That's the jackpot for a local food systems advocate. And so I have always known that the Up County has to be part of my vision for thriving and for well-being, even as a down county resident. And that's why I'm running for county council at large, because I want to make sure that we are casting that kind of vision that recognizes our mutual interdependence, that recognizes the need for all of us to thrive if our county is going to thrive, that recognizes that we have to be protecting our agricultural lands, that we have to be supporting thriving local businesses and small business districts in rural communities, that we have to be protecting our air and our groundwater, and making sure that the Up County and that the Agricultural Reserve can continue to play its critical role in helping us address things like climate change, economic inequity, and hunger. So I'm thrilled to be here this evening, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Will?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I was joking with my colleagues, we've upgraded these. This is a really fancy debate dig, so thank you to the town council. Good to be here. I'm Will Jamando, an at-large member of the council. Born and raised here in Montgomery County, I'm a civil rights lawyer by training. Worked in the Obama White House and Department of Education and Discovery Communications. I live in Ashton. I've got a neighbor here in Albany, in one of the two Up County districts now that we have 2 and 7. Good to see Marilyn Bottom here, who's running for District 2. I think that Poolsville is not new to me. I'm a big fan. I was just at the Maggie Nightingale refreshed library, which is amazing. There was a set of teens in there actually utilizing the teen space, which is not common at libraries. I'm the lead for libraries in the council. It just shows that when you make a space welcoming, make it usable to people, they will use it. The children's space was getting used. I was just here a couple weeks ago with many of you for the ribbon cutting, or the groundbreaking rather, of the new Poolsville High School. Long time coming, but we're making progress. We have more to do. As was mentioned, I spent much of my time living in East County, which has something in common with this part of the Western County: severe health disparities. That's why we need these wraparound services, the co-location. We're going to push for that. We're going to make it happen. And I'm really excited to discuss the other needs and concerns of the community. So thanks for having us, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Gabe?
Thanks, Lane. So, hi, everybody. I'm Gabe Albernaz, president of the council this year. And about 13 years ago, I sat right at that desk and got grilled by Jerry Klobakowski on the development of the Western Outdoor Pool. And a couple years later, we were able to inaugurate that pool and rename it in honor of Sarah Howard. Sarah's family came out that day, and I fell in love with Poolsville that day. The way that the community came together, it was very open and honest and authentic. And this is the kind of place when someone gets sick, people sign up and do a listserv to see and bring them food. This is the kind of place that really tries to have each other's back. And I've tried to have your back for 16 years, 12 years as the director of the rec department, and 4 years now in this council. I was there for the ribbon cutting of Crossvines, there for the groundbreaking of the new high school. And while we still have work to do to complete that community center, which has to be part of that high school project, we have accomplished a lot, and we've done it together. Because I respect so much the work of this community and how united all of you are. You have an ally in me, we are partners, and I look forward to answering tonight's questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Evan?
Thank you, Lynn. And also thank you, Jeff and Jim, for hosting tonight's conversation, and happy 43rd anniversary to the chamber. It is good to be back in Poolsville. I always enjoy coming up here and participating in all the community events. And this is real town community, and it is a gem for Montgomery County. And it's an important part of who we are, not only from the agricultural perspective, but for the community. And for those of you who don't know me, before joining the council, where I currently serve as vice president, I was a journalist. I was at CNN for 12 years. And having been a journalist, it provides me with, I think, a unique way of operating. I ask a lot of questions. I engage a lot. And it was through my regular conversations with members of the commission, members of the community, that about 2 years ago, I learned that the Nightingale Library, the lights were out, and the marquee. And when people had told me that, I reached out to libraries, I reached out to DGS, and we got it fixed. And I share that as just one little example, because sometimes things like that, lights, are overlooked. But because of my conversations, because of my engagement and friendships with so many people here, I pick up on those things, and I make sure that your interests are taken care of. I look forward to talking more about your interests and what we can do to continue making life here in Poolsville better. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
And thanks, Ling, Jeff, Jim, everybody who put this together. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am asking for your support to return to the county council. We've been through a couple of very incredibly difficult years that I hope we're going to have the opportunity to talk about today. And we're going to really need experienced voices back on the council to address the challenges and the opportunities that are facing Montgomery County over the next 4 years. I come to public service trained as a community organizer, trained to bring people together and identify common ground and get things done. I represented Montgomery County as a state lawmaker for 8 years in the General Assembly, which is one reason I'm supported by Senator Feldman, Delegate Xi, and others who understand having relationships in Annapolis to bring the money in to pay for our roads and our transit and our agricultural programs and many other things are critical to making sure we have a quality of life in Montgomery County that we deserve. I was twice elected by my colleagues to serve as the council vice president and president over the last 2 incredibly difficult years. And as at the end of my term as council president, Dr. Fauci praised the council's work under my leadership for keeping the public safe. The NAACP praised us and gave us an award for our civil rights work, and Affordable Housing Group gave us an award for our record investment in affordable housing. We have so many challenges in front of us. We've learned so many lessons over the last 2 years, and I want to return to the council to make sure we have experienced voices to apply those lessons and make sure you're getting everything you deserve, and we're maintaining the quality of life and addressing all the opportunities in front of us to build a stronger and healthier Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right.
Thank you to Link and to Jim and to the chamber for having this important discussion. Congratulations on 40+ years of economic empowerment to this community of county. As the only candidate living up county, this is so important to me to be here this evening to introduce myself. I'm not new to Poolsville. I remember coming here as vice president of the Montgomery County Municipal League, vice president, working with Jim to, ensure that tax duplication actually passed here in the county to bring back resources for services that the county does, that the city already takes care of. So bringing resources back to our local government is nothing new to me. And so I'm running for Montgomery County Council at Large to ensure that more resources are brought back to the communities that are often unheard, overlooked, and under-resourced. And so as we continue this discussion here this evening, I look forward to talking with you about my SMART agenda, which addresses strengthening our commitment to education from cradle to career and beyond, making a living in our county more affordable, and advancing local food production in the Ag Reserve. That's always been a part of my platform, and I've always discussed this agenda. We also need to ensure that we're revitalizing our economy. The pandemic is not over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to start now because Scott started with Randy. And the first question is about White's Ferry, as you might expect. Poolsville is in the middle of the Ag Reserve, and as you said, it's a wonderful place to live, but our main street is really Fisher Avenue. 28 actually goes by past us, so if we don't have 28 work of this Fisher Avenue working, we're in trouble. The ferry's been closed now 1.5 years. We are upset, a lot of us are, and we're just wondering if you have thoughts about, one, has this been mishandled? Is there something that should have been done that wasn't done? And two, how can we get this resolved as soon as possible? So Randy?
Yes, So I think I wanna start by saying, oh, sorry, how long do I have to answer? Is it
1 minute.
1 minute, right? So I wanna start by saying that these kinds of unique transportation issues, it's really critical to have county council members who are able to look at the specific and detailed transportation issues that up-county communities are experiencing. A lot of times when we talk about our transportation network, we don't talk about things like the ferry, but it's a critical crossing and a critical mode of transportation access. And there are folks who've built their lives around being able to get from here across the river into Northern Virginia for their livelihoods. I don't know that I want to speak in detail about, whether or not things have been mishandled, but I think one of the really important things that a council member has to be able to do, especially a council member at large, is to be able to bring to the table parties who have not understood that they have a shared interest in resolving an issue. And this is part of the work that I do every day around thorny issues like racial equity, like environmental injustice, where you have to bring together folks who've often been on different sides and help them to see how they mutually benefit from a resolution together.
Thank you. Will?
Yes, it's an important issue. I mean, this is something that up until a couple of years ago was running since the 1700s, right? So before we were a country, people were used to it. So when you take something like that away, it has cascading effects. It's tough because you have multiple jurisdictions, and I was just talking with Phyllis Randall, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors the other day, and we actually talked about this. But then you have private landowners, right? And that kind of conflation, you really need council members, one, that know their colleagues in the region, work with them well, but also can bring people together when we don't have all the decision-making authority. That's happened in other parts of the county where people have sat on land for a long time that we wanted to develop, for example. I don't think it was mishandled in the sense from our side, we're doing what we can. But what I can promise you is I'll continue to engage the parties with colleagues to make sure that we try to get it real.
Gabe?
This is a critical issue. It's a lifeline in so many different ways, not just for Poolesville, but for the entire county and the entire community. Councilmember Friedson has been our lead, and he has been working aggressively with Delegate David Frazier Dugwell. I really want to thank Jim and the team for applying the kind of pressure necessary to be able to get this over the goal line. It is a complicated issue because of what Councilmember Jawander just mentioned with the private landowner holding out. But there have been very recent, like in the last couple of weeks, conversations between our county attorney and the Loudoun County attorney about ensuring Loudoun is doing everything that it can to acquire the site. And I think the time of waiting patiently is long gone, and we have to move much more aggressively than we have before. And if that means putting up resources, we need to go down that road, because if that's what it's going to take to get this done, we've got to get it done.
Thank you. Evan?
So this impasse is taking way too long. That's my opinion. If we had control over that parcel of land, I would have handled it differently. I would have used our powers as county government to, quite frankly, use it in the domain and take that for the public good. And I'm a member of the Transportation Planning Board. I've spoken with regional leaders from Northern Virginia and from Loudoun County, and I have implored them to use their government powers to do what is in the best interest of the region. I've also supported the $200,000 that we and Loudoun County have also used to figure out a way forward to try and mitigate this. But I don't think that is working. Clearly it is not. And so I will continue to implore our partners across the river to do what they can, to do what they are empowered to do to fix the situation as soon as possible.
Don?
I would say I agree with everything that's been said. I would like to see this issue be much more of a priority by our Department of Transportation at the county level. This is, as has been said earlier, it's unfortunate that this region gets too little attention on the county government, and this needs to be a top priority. This has been in place for a very long time. We could serve 11,000 vehicles a day. It is crazy that we're not resolving this. I've spoken to Chairwoman Randall as well in the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. I serve with her on the Council of Governments. This should be a regional priority as well. And it should be, it's not just a transportation problem, and I chair our transportation committee, full disclosure, so I see the stuff up close, but it's a business problem. we have the authority right now to pass a 50 cent per vehicle tax. It's surprising that we do. And the state, we don't want the state to get in the way and to see it as a preemption issue. So it's very important that we're working with our District 15 colleagues, that we get that tax passed, and that we work with private landowners to solve the problem. So I'm in your corner to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. So before my time ended, my last priority was tackling climate change through multimodal transportation infrastructure solutions. This is an economic issue. This is a transportation issue. We're really going to not only address our economic challenges, we also need to ensure that single occupancy vehicles are not degrading our infrastructure because this crossing cannot be resolved. Our job as council members is to bring stakeholders to the table and find solutions to move forward. And so, as Tom mentioned, every year we meet with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, stakeholders from DC and Virginia, to identify priorities and how we're going to move forward. And so I was privileged to sit down with Chairwoman Randall from Loudoun County to talk about some of these issues. And it's all about relationships, how you move forward. We can do this in a collaborative way that does not separate people.
Thank you. So will you be the first one to answer this next question?
Oh, yeah.
You skip Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, sorry.
Happens all the time.
I've done that. I've done it a couple times before.
Tell the joke.
I'm gonna vote for you though.
Especially at home.
The jokes do not land at home.
Yeah.
They gotta get like a dad joke, right? That's how bad. So I just want to talk about the resiliency of our transportation network, both in the county and regionally. So a ferry has caused a significant economic decline in a very important town, right? So that's and a sinkhole on 270 has kind of stalled out a major portion of our county and a couple counties. So we need to get ahead of these things. We need better infrastructure. We need to take it seriously, and we need backup plans. And then the second part of what I want to talk about is the economic impact of it, right? So I think we could have done a lot more by saying, hey, we're not getting customers coming across the river going to Locals and Bassett's. We need some help up here. Can we highlight these restaurants? Can we sort of have an economic surge and have people come up here and enjoy and spend their money here and have a good time because we need it, because we're losing out from people not coming over from across the river.
Thank you. That was a good answer. I should have come to you. Sorry about that. Will, you're gonna answer this question first. The county has been revising its master plan in a project called Thrive 2050. And I know a lot of you, all the incumbents have been involved with this. What do you think of the policies proposed in the plan for the Ag Reserve? And of course, schools was right in the middle of it. It's very vital to us as a community. And specifically, what is needed to ensure the Ag Reserve remains viable economically, protected for development, and a good place to live? Because this is such a broad issue, I think we can give 2 minutes to each of the candidates to answer this one. So, thank you, Will.
Appreciate it. Like, as you know, I sit on the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee where we review master plans and the zoning for the county. We've had 9 sessions on this. We passed it out of committee. I think the good news, to take the angle that you're trying to take on the Ag Reserve, I'll get to that in a second. Overall, what it's trying to do, and we're going to still work it through, just had a briefing this week about an expanded racial equity chapter, expanded environmental chapter, which obviously matters a lot to the Ag Reserve, and an expanded economic development chapter. We kind of had general agreement that we're going to add those things in before we take it up. But what I tried to do on committee was to make sure that the things that were left out, that we had enough tools in the toolkit to address the needs of Montgomery County. A big part of that is making sure that the Ag Reserve is protected. And if you look at some of the concepts in Thrive, like complete communities, 15-minute living, more transportation, activity centers, I think it does a pretty good job. It could always be better in respecting the character of the Ag Reserve as far as what it identifies as activity centers, for example. And we had a lot of discussion about that. Also, the importance of the Ag Reserve for local food production. That's something that I've been working on and a lot of us have been working And so I think we do need Thrive as a vision document. We need to make it better. I worked hard to try to make it better in committee, but we'll keep doing it at the full council. And then we will get into the really difficult work and important work of implementing the vision document through master plans, zoning text amendments, and the like. And I think we have what we need and will have what we need in the overall document, despite what was admittedly not the best outreach and engagement. And I worked hard on that too, and that's part of this process that we're going through the racial equity and additional outreach and engagement. I think we'll have what we need to get what we all want, a thriving, economically diverse community that protects the edge.
Thank you. Gabe?
Thanks, Lee. Well, first of all, the Ag Reserve is a treasure, and we have to do everything that we can to protect it and thrive. As it is currently written, I don't think it goes far enough. And so we are just now having the document come before the full council, and I do credit the Fed Committee who had 9 sessions on this. We have been aggressively trying to solicit additional feedback, and we do need another chapter focused exclusively on climate and the impact of our environment. We also need the chapter that focuses on economic development, which also crosses over into the Ag Reserve. Because the farmers that are farming, and I've had the opportunity to visit most of the farms, are providing not just wonderful food security here in our community and around the country, but also economic development opportunities here in Montgomery County. So Thrive has to take all of that into an account in a manner that is respectful, but also sustainable. And I don't think that it goes far enough just yet. Now, we have not completed the process, and we are right now, we hit the pause button so we can get more community engagement and feedback, but the council will be taking this back up again in the fall, and we will be working collaboratively with the community to ensure that we get as close to a document that most people can agree on that we can possibly get to, and try to use reasonable as our barometer.
Evan?
I appreciate the question, Link, and there are, I think, 2 parts to the question. One about the agricultural reserve and the vision for the agricultural reserve. And I think that vision was set when it was created back in 1980. And all the master plans and this general plan, Thrive 2050, take into account what that vision was and the beauty that it remains today. Recognizing that the 93,000 acres are so important, not only for the preservation of our community, but the economic viability, and also just the pure nature of it as well. I come up here all the time, my husband and I, and just enjoy the bounty that is up here. And I was actually just over 270 on Monday. I was at Butler's Orchard, and I was there celebrating the partnership between our farms and some of our thriving environmental businesses. I was there to celebrate the expansion of new business opportunities with Compost Crew, a composting business that resulted after I passed a zoning text amendment that facilitated more composting, on-site composting on our farms. And it was a wonderful, wonderful event, facilitated by the Office of Agriculture. But back to Thrive 2050, as the council continues to have conversations about Thrive 2050, clearly making sure that the agricultural reserve remains the gem that it is. So what I'm specifically looking for in this general plan, in this document, is how it makes life here more affordable. Because it is extremely hard for people who've lived here for decades, and I'm very concerned that our kids and our grandkids will not be able to afford to live in Montgomery County. And so as we continue to grow, because we do not build walls around Montgomery County, I'm going to be looking at this document to make sure the agricultural reserve is preserved and that we increase housing affordability in other parts of the county as well.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Agree with much of what's been said. There's a lot of exciting and positive elements to Thrive as it is right now. We have a general plan, if you didn't know, from 1993 right now. It doesn't mention climate, doesn't mention racial equity, doesn't mention many other key concepts that are central to our land use planning right now, but we're still under that general plan. So we have to have a relevant general plan. We're actually required by state law to have it. There are hundreds of meetings that have already gone into creating the draft Thrive plan now. And there will be more, and there's lots of opportunities for you to engage more and get your feedback into Thrive. There's a lot that's there that's good, like the 15-minute community idea that was mentioned, that everything, we would be a more holistic, a more sustainable county if you could reach everything you need: jobs, grocery stores, dry cleaning, coffee houses, restaurants, parks, within 15 minutes of your home. And that's ambitious. We didn't build the county that way, but rebuilding the county over time with that in mind, I think is a great goal. Preserving the agriculture reserve is at the top of my list. It's really a tremendous jewel of the county. And it has to be financially viable to be able to do that. It has to be, it's very good that we're updating the plan. I've been a big supporter of things like Evan's zoning text amendment to provide more composting there. I've been a big supporter of cross fines. And I've worked for many years with the Wineries Association, oh boy, 30 seconds, the Breweries Associations, others, to allow landowners to make money on their own land. And that's one reason when I was a state delegate, I sponsored the wine shipping bill, which was their top priority for years. It took 10 years to pass that bill. I was the fourth sponsor, but I got it done. And that's added a lot of financial viability to our wineries owners in the Ag Reserve and all over the state. There's a lot more that association, a lot of ideas that they have that we should be moving forward on to make sure the Ag Reserve is both sustainable and financially profitable. Thank you.
So, serving as a council member in the city of Gaithersburg, we have the unique distinction that we have our own planning commission. And so land use and what we do with our very limited green space is very important to the future development and economic investments that happen in a community. And so when you think about Thrive and the holistic approach of what it's envisioning for our entire county over the next 30 years, how much engagement happened up county? When we talk about who is actually included, what's included, I like to think about who wasn't at the table, who wasn't invited to weigh in on the plans. And so that's why it's been a year and nothing has happened. There needs to be more input on the plan, and we need to ensure that this up-county gem continues to serve as the nation's largest ag reserve. You know, it generates over 280 million, and if you look at the county's Economic Development Corporation website, there's not much information about what's happening to increase or envision a brighter future, more investment for the up-county to leverage this resource. And so I want to ensure that if I'm elected, that we actually prioritize this gem, that we value so much, the lungs of our county. When we are trying to develop every other parcel of land around this county, we have something that we can protect and preserve. And it's going to take people who understand the importance and who actually want to see the investments multiply. And that's the possibility that we can have here. Throughout the pandemic, the up county has fed this county with fresh fruits and vegetables. They've ensured that our restaurants have food to farm tabling. And so why can't we ensure that that continues to happen in a more sustainable way, to ensure that we are eating locally, that we're cultivating crops to tables locally? Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Let's talk about beer and housing. Remember at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was saying we're all in this together, right? So Montgomery County should be all in this together. So we're a growing county. We've grown by about 100,000 people in the last 10 years, and they obviously need housing. So when I talk about doing this together, I think it's the responsibility of everywhere outside of the Ag Reserve to make sure that we have enough housing so that we never have to touch the Ag Reserve. Like we have to develop it, not at all. It stays the same. It's green, it's open space, it's terrific. And I think that's a responsibility of people that live outside the Ag Reserve to be more welcoming of constructing new housing. I have an economic plan to create an economic identity for the county to build our economy called the Quad H's. So the first three H's are the boring ones: hospitality, high tech, and healthcare. The fourth one is hops, which, as everyone knows, is an important ingredient in beers, and then we're tying this all together. We have an incredible, growing, thriving craft brewery industry, and that can serve as an economic engine for the Ag Reserve. We don't sell ourselves as a regional destination for our craft breweries and wineries, but we can and we should be. I'm not saying we're going to be the Napa Valley of Mid-Atlantic craft breweries, but we can do a whole lot better than we're doing now. So we can have people come to the Ag Reserve, spend their money, have a good time, and then leave. And that, I think, is it, within Thrive, within this greater context, is something that we can do to protect the Ag Reserve and increase the economic viability of the county.
Okay?
So what first got me excited in local government was my experience living in a city just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, where I was part of the comprehensive planning process for our city. And in a city of just 75,000 people, we had a 60-member community steering committee that guided that process for more than 2 years. And these weren't just input meetings. These were deep meetings where we as community members were setting the agenda, determining the priorities of that comprehensive plan, and then digging deep on each and every section of that comprehensive plan to determine what should go into it and what the future of our community should look like. More than a decade later, I'm still proud of that plan, and I still feel a deep level of investment in what we created together. That's what's needed to create a strong shared vision that can guide a community like Montgomery County over the next 30 years. And the direct answer to your question, no, the current version of Thrive does not adequately address the needs of the Up County, the needs of the agricultural reserve. It doesn't address the agricultural economy. It doesn't effectively address environmental protection. It doesn't talk at all about how we're going to make sure that rural communities have access to the resources and amenities that they need. And we need to recognize the seriousness of this document. It's not just a vision document. It sets the bones for what we'll do as a county, and we know that because that's what the Wedges and Corridors Plan has been doing for 60 years. So we need to make sure that when we talk about pausing to engage our community, that we shift from this idea of input to actually having us as community members in the driver's seat, participating in our own governance, setting the priorities, and determining what needs to happen in that plan so we make sure that it answers the critical questions that we have as community members. And that's the kind of expertise that I want to bring to the council. Deep participatory governance where we know how decisions are made and we know that the key questions that we have are going to get answered.
Thank you. Gabe, you'll be the first to answer this question. This came from the audience. In 2017, the county council declared a climate emergency and committed to reducing the county's emissions by 80% by 2027. What is the most important step or steps you think we need to do to meet this commitment if you think we should be meeting it? And in that context, there was a bill, and I don't know the details of it, but I know it was introduced recently and there was some support for it, that I think bans natural gas in major commercial buildings going forward.
Bill 1322.
Okay, so, and one of the issues there for us in the Ag Reserve is what about farmers and when they build buildings, so they have to do the same thing. So Gabe, would you go ahead and go back to the standard 1 minute answer?
Sure, well, there's not a lot more important than addressing the issue of climate change because it's such a foundational issue for so many different things. And the county has been aggressive in both establishing benchmarks to strive for, but also policies that we've enacted recently that have been aggressive. Most of the greenhouse gases, at least in our community, come from buildings. And the council did pass, in partnership with the executive branch, new standards moving forward for our buildings. And the bill you're referring to was just recently introduced by Councilmember Reamer and will go through the legislative process. I think it's a very laudable and important goal, but we have to make sure we don't create more problems that we're trying to solve when putting forward important pieces of legislation like that. So I have a lot of questions regarding that bill specifically. But the other thing that we have to do is get people out of their cars and move to electrify more of our vehicles. Those are important steps that we all have to do in tandem. And finally, I'll mention composting. I really appreciate Councilmember Glass's leadership on this, but there's more.
Evan?
We are in a climate emergency. Make no mistake about that. And 52% of our carbon emissions here in Montgomery County come from our building sector. And we have just passed a piece of legislation in Rockville. Our counterparts and partners in Annapolis passed a statewide bill as well. So I think we are going to be leaders in the nation in making sure that that 52% we start bending that curve. The other part, there's 42% of our carbon emissions actually comes from transportation. So as has been noted, there's more that we have to do to reduce the single occupancy vehicle, make sure that all of our fleets, public buses, cars, we have more charging stations for all of them. But circling back to a question that was asked before, this is why it's also imperative that we get White's Ferry back into operation. Because when you think about all the gasoline that is being wasted with all of your neighbors and others in the region having to circle around to cross the Potomac, it is very wasteful and it does not help the situation.
Thank you, Tom.
Boy, climate change in 1 minute, okay. So this is obviously an existential crisis and our greatest long-term threat. There's no question. As has been said, 50% of our carbon is due to our old building stock, right? And so I want you to know about I chair our Transportation and Environment Committee, and I want you to know about 3 pieces of legislation that we passed recently. One is new green building code to make sure all the new buildings that are built in the future are energy efficient, okay, number 1. Number 2, the Building Energy Performance Standard to make sure that we are upgrading our existing older commercial and residential buildings, multifamily residential buildings, to have new windows, new doors, new insulation, new rooftop solar, other things like that, so they're producing less carbon. And the third thing is the biggest climate bill we've ever passed, I sponsored with Councilmember Friedson, your local council member, to create $100 million of low-interest loans to give an incentive to our building owners to retrofit their buildings, to create thousands of jobs, save millions of dollars, and save lots of carbon. Doing those 3 things together is going to take us a very long way. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are in the midst of a climate emergency. The climate action plan that was designed by the county has hundreds of pages of aspirational recommendations. When we're actually going to start implementing those decisions, that's another challenge. What we see happening at the council are lots of great ideas and stagnation when it comes time to implement those ideas. And so if we're really in a climate emergency, when are we going to start acting like we are? The Climate Solutions Now bill, that passed at the state level, I was proud to co-sponsor it. I was proud to go and testify in support of that legislation. It's going to bring resources back to the community to ensure that we are retrofitting our businesses, that we have resources to help our businesses transition into greener, cleaner, and more sustainable solutions. The biggest emitters are single occupancy vehicles, so I was glad to pass by the 4 charging stations here. We need infrastructure solutions here as well to support those emergencies.
Thank you. Scott?
So I don't think there's any dearth of great ideas, and quite frankly, I think the county government has done a pretty good job of moving forward into a greener place where we live. But I think we skipped a step. We missed sort of the ask not what the climate can do for you, ask what you can do for the climate moment. We handle things on a high level, and we're taking care of things there. We haven't asked all 1.1 million residents and all of our businesses to do something. Right? No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So can you compost? Can you get a rain barrel hooked into your gutter system? There's a million things that people can do on a very small scale. I think we just need to ask them. And since we talk about combating climate change, I think asking people to be soldiers in this fight is pretty reasonable. And I think people want to participate. They just don't know what they don't know in terms of how they can help.
Ready?
So part of my work as an environmental justice organizer is organizing with people around the country to surface the most cutting edge solutions that people are using in their communities, especially in highly vulnerable communities, whether due to socioeconomic status or due to environmental conditions, and figuring out how we move the needle on building out now, not in 5 or 10 years, because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we don't have 5 or 10 years. But how do we build out now the kind of transportation networks that we need? How are we partnering with one another to build the renewable energy infrastructure that we need in our communities? How are we making sure that sustainable waste management infrastructure and ending things like the Dickinson incinerator are immediately on the table as far as what we're going to take action to do? How are we making sure that we're addressing what's going on with our groundwater and our stormwater, because we are feeling these impacts right now in Montgomery County. And if we don't address this immediately, what we've been experiencing around climate change is going to look like a walk in the park compared to what is coming down the pipe. And that's not fair for any of us, and especially our young.
Will?
Thank you. We are in a climate emergency, absolutely. One of the things we funded, one of my first actions on the council with colleagues, we funded $500,000 for this climate action plan to say, what should we prioritize? There's a lot of things you can do. We need to do them all. A lot of them mentioned. Obviously, buildings, we've taken action on that. Building performance standards. The bill that you mentioned, which I co-sponsored, along with Councilman Raymer, and the county executive supported, would move us to all electric building code by 2024. A lot of exceptions, on ramps for different communities and folks. And that, with the whole climate issue, you're gonna have to do that. Because there's communities that were hit hard, that low-income communities, for example, community solar is an example, where you have to provide support, subsidies. What you can't do is just let them be double whammy by that. So we're gonna have to do that. But we've made some progress. MCPS, the first in the nation to have this movement towards an all-electric fleet, right, and over the coming years here. Community solar, I mentioned, we did I think a measured approach for solar in the agri-reserve, right? I worked a lot on that. So there's more to do in getting the stop sign. Time in a minute is hard.
And that's a good point, and Tom raised the same point, so let's do a minute and a half now for answers. I thought with 7 of you, you might actually need a little more, less time, but I think we can do that. So a minute and a half from now. So this is gonna be Evan's question first. And this is a little bit of a curveball, but I think it's fair because one of the things in pools that we focus a lot on is our students and our teenagers and having them have productive things to do. And as you know, this area is pretty isolated. And recently I got a question from a student, and I heard it in a question session we had with a bunch of students too. But this student raised it with me in an email. And I know it's MCPS policy, but you guys oversee MCPS. So I think it's a fair question. Her question was that recently there was a debate with the county executives, it was here actually, and one of the questions that was raised was the MCPS policy on bullying. Supposedly it's a zero tolerance bullying policy. The student is telling me that she doesn't see that really being implemented, and in fact, there's a lot of it going on and nothing in her view is getting done. It's a pretty important issue in terms of mental health too, so if you want to address it a little broader in terms of mental health for students as well, that's fine, but she's specifically talking about the anti-bullying policy and whether MCPS is doing a good job at enforcing it.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for the student for raising it. This is critically important. We know that because of the last 2 years, our students are in mental health emergency. And that's not just my opinion, that is the opinion of the American Psychological Association. The stress that our kids have been under and remain under is doing incredible damage, and I'm extremely concerned. And I'm hopeful that MCPS, with the support of the council, will continue expanding mental health programs, will continue expanding wellness programs. And that is inside of MCPS. And I'll share with you yesterday, another bright moment here in Montgomery County. County Council President Albernauz and I had the pleasure of being in Wheaton for the opening of the MoCo Reconnect Center, which is a youth drop-in center, where there are going to be mental health services for kids who don't feel welcome at home, whether they're LGBTQ+, or any other problem that they might be experiencing, bullying, or racism, or anything else. And it took 6 years to get that facility open. And I know you're thinking, well, that's in Wheaton, that's not up here. But we worked really hard to get one of them open. And we're going to continue working hard to get one up county and get them spread across the county, because time is wasting. Our kids need help now, but we're working on it. And it is a joint effort across all county government.
Tom?
I've been in office for 16 years, at the state level and county level. And the way I look at so many of these problems is the canary in the coal mine theory. If you have one student raising this, it means there's hundreds of students feeling this, right, that didn't raise it. And that's the problem. It wasn't the first student that raised this. Our students, as Evan said, have been in a mental health crisis for a long time. The whole county has been. pre-COVID and it's been exacerbated under COVID because so many of our residents, and particularly our young people, are dealing with the loss of parents, grandparents, and friends due to COVID, dealing with isolation, dealing with anxiety, and dealing with bullying. And I've heard from a lot of our students that MCPS doesn't enforce our bullying policy. And I've heard that about other policies as well. A larger issue is really that so many of our students and our educators don't feel safe going to school for a whole host of reasons, including guns, including mental illness, including bullying. And that's one reason when I was council president last year, I fought hard to get 26 social workers into this budget. I couldn't get the majority of the council to support that. In the end of the year, we managed to get all the council behind funding MCPS dollars for 50 social workers. My wife's a social worker, I'm a huge believer. They've now hired 33. So there's new social workers, mental health professionals in so many high schools and middle schools, but we have not nearly where we need to be. And we need to finish not just Poolsville High School, congratulations on being the best, but the Community Wellness Center in Poolsville and staff it the right way. Thank you.
Lauren?
Thank you for that question, Mike. And so having a daughter that recently graduated from MCPS, this is very close to home. I was really honored to join our Congressman David Trone 2 years ago alongside Will Jawando, our student member of the board at the time, to discuss his comprehensive mental health in schools pilot program. That was to bring federal resources to our school systems to ensure that wraparound services were available to all of our students. I think during the pandemic, we've realized how we can leverage technology. I'm a huge proponent of telemedicine and mobile medicine to ensure that our students have opportunities for wellness, for mindfulness, and opportunities to talk with a mental health professional. We're not hiring enough mental health professionals. We don't have enough nurses. Our students are at a crisis. They're at a crossroad. They're transitioning back into the school system without the supports that they need to have to be in an environment that fosters learning, that fosters education, where they are free to just be and exist. And so what do we need to do as the council? We have to provide those resources. We have to work with the Department of Health and Human Services to ensure that people who have their social work license can continue their education, whether it's ensuring that they have a job upon graduation or more resources to help them complete their degrees.
Thank you. Scott?
So I'm a pretty positive person, so when I'm critical of something, I like to do it in a friendly way with a smile on my face. I think there is a lot of opportunity for MCPS to improve the situation, not only on an education level, but on a social emotional learning level in our schools. I'm gonna do a motion with my hands for the camera room. A lot of room, a lot of opportunity to do better. I've got 2 kids in the elementary school. What really worries me, so the kids are not behaviorally as to what their age is. So imagine they're getting their driver's licenses at 16, but behaviorally they're 14 years old. So good luck driving home this evening, drive safe. But it's the same thing in our high schools with their mental health status, with how they're treating other people. They're just not, they don't have that level of maturity because we kept them out of schools for a very long time. What keeps me up at night is if we just go back to business as usual. So the school year just let out. We're gonna come back at the end of August, early September. If we just go through how we've been educating children and how we've been treating them before the pandemic, that would be a real tragedy. So we need all these mental health resources to give them and give them real access to it, both on an ongoing and acute basis. But yeah, the school system needs to do a lot better enforcing their policies and making sure that students are treating each other with dignity and respect.
Randy?
So I've dealt with chronic depression since I was a very young child, about 8 or 9 years old. And I mention that, and I try and speak about that openly as much as possible, because I want to destigmatize for our community and particularly for our young people, being able to talk about mental health and to be able to acknowledge when we need help and be able to ask for the resources that we need. And I've heard over the time that I've been organizing in Montgomery County, students organize and talk very specifically, very vocally about how they experience segregation both across our school system and also even within our school buildings, about how policing targeted at Black and brown students impacts them, about how an overemphasis on testing creates such an enormous amount of stress. And one of the things that I am deeply committed to is to listening to our young people as the experts on their lives and on what it means to be an MCPS student right now. We have tremendous student organizers here in Montgomery County. It is one of the most impressive things I have ever seen. But we do not listen to them well enough when they tell us what is going on and what the solutions are that they need to see in order to feel safe, in order to feel well, and in order to thrive, not just in getting academic knowledge and crammed into their head, but in growing as full human beings. And I'm committed to making sure that we're centering the voices of our students in developing solutions for our public schools so that they know that they are being listened to and well served.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, and I appreciate the question from the young person, and whoever asked that. First, bullying is not okay, it's not your fault, and you should report it, who, what, when, why, where, and if it's not followed up on appropriately, you should reach out to the principal, then you should reach out to the school board, or you should write us, let us know. And I know people have done that, but I just wanna get that process out there, it's not okay. Hurt people, and we have to make sure that we're building the suite of services, some have been mentioned, to make sure that we can support all of our students, those who are being bullied, and those who are bullying, because normally there's a root cause to that most times for kids, that they're dealing with something themselves. It's why one of the things I've been a big proponent of, and we funded at the council level, at my suggestion is increase money for restorative justice training. And I don't just say that because I think it's good. I've actually gone through the restorative justice process with my children in UCPS, where you try to heal both parties, the offender, and my daughter was the victim. Had her hand slammed in the door by a young child who was angry, and she had to go to the hospital. And we had to sit in there and talk about what happened with parents. And those aren't easy conversations, but it's an example of what we have to do to heal. And I'm proud that we've made investments in that. We need the whole set. We need a school psychologist in every high school. We need a wellness center in every high school. We need more counselors. We need the Every Learning texting hotline to be extended year after year. I work with Councilman Fruits on that. So there's a lot of things we need to do, but I'm gonna stop because it says stop.
Dave?
Thanks, Lane. So my first job professionally was as a youth development worker. And so I've been in this space for over 22 years now. And I've never seen what we're seeing right now. The volume of cases that are rising to a clinical level is overwhelming. Every Mind, as Councilman Rwanda mentioned, has the contract to run the crisis line for Montgomery County. And they recently reported that there were about 9,000 calls all of last year. And this was a month ago. They had already received 15,000. These are people in distress looking to commit suicide, or somebody reporting somebody who was thinking about committing suicide. So this has to be among our highest priorities. And I know MCPS is trying hard, the council is trying to support those efforts. We have expanded the wellness program, wellness centers to every high school. We have expanded social workers. We are looking at hiring more behavioral health specialists. But this is going to have to be an all of the above approach, working holistically with communities to fully address this issue. Because cyberbullying in particular is something that is of deep concern to me, because this is uncharted territory. This isn't face-to-face anymore. And the type of cyberbullying that's happening is not, it's happening at such a level we're not keeping pace with it. And so our policies that have been enacted to address cyberbullying in general don't take some of the new forms of bullying into account. And we have to hold those that are conducting bullying, providing support, but also hold folks accountable.
Thank you. Kevin? That's Kevin. So Tom, you'll be answering this question then. A recent county health department study, I think most of you have seen it, recent 2018, on zip codes, healthcare outcomes, ranked Poolsville the last out of 36 zip codes that we looked at. The previous public health officer testified before this commission several years ago and said that, in answer to a question, that it is possible that the lack of continuing and easy access to medical care, because we don't have any specialists out here. They're all in Germantown and Gaithersburg, is probably a factor in those health outcomes. What can be done to improve health outcomes in the Western County?
Well, I tend to begin a lot of my answers by reminding everyone that the primary responsibility for healthcare delivery, including mental health, primary responsibility for education, for early education, lies with the state. And that's why it's so important that we have somebody, people on the county council that have strong relationships with your state legislators to bring home the reforms and to bring home the dollars to support our health industry and services in Montgomery County. We have this approach in Montgomery County that honestly drives me crazy, where we don't have an organized and effective program in many ways to bring home dollars from the state. And then we complain that we don't get enough dollars from Annapolis. And then we throw up our hands and say, oh, well, we can't count on Annapolis to pay for everything we need, so let's just beat up on the county council and the county executive and make sure they're paying for it. There's never enough money to pay for all the unmet needs in Montgomery County. Sorry, 30 seconds, I got off on a tangent here. We need a lot more funding from the state. We need more flexibility. We need more community-based services. We need more telehealth, as been mentioned, and many other things, because the state deals with healthcare provisions in all kinds of different jurisdictions, including agricultural jurisdictions and rural jurisdictions like Poolsville. We need to work together with the state to bring in more dollars. We need more flexibility on some of their regulations. Thank you.
Lauren?
I saw that study. I too was alarmed by that study because Gaithersburg was maybe 1 or 2 zip codes away from that study of having the highest disparities. And compared to the west side of our city, it was about 18 years of life expectancy. And so this is critically important. If we don't think about health in all policies, as a public health professional, that's what I've done my entire career. In the midst of a public health crisis, we're going to need trusted, tested, and experienced leadership at the table. And that ensures that any policies that we look at, not just through an equity lens, but how is it impacting the communities that have been under-resourced and long ignored for years. We see the data and we need to target the interventions to adequately address the data long-term, not just short-term solutions, but immediately. And so when I talk about the infrastructure that needs to happen in communities and how we plan and build communities, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's having the mobile med that comes up to the up county, whether we have a clinic finally to serve the up county, because we don't have the transportation infrastructure to get people to clinics on the weekends when there's an emergency. There are so many people who are living up here, seniors that don't have access to critically important healthcare needs. And so we have to figure out a way to get that infrastructure up here and work with our healthcare system in Montgomery County.
Scott?
Having a permanent health officer would be nice. I think we've been without that for quite some time. That's a big, I don't want to say failure, but failure, right? We're a pretty big county, 1.1 million people. It's a pretty big job. If you don't have someone, why can't we get someone full time? That being said, I hope you're not looking for a 39-year-old attorney to come up with all the ideas to solve your health problems, because that's not what I'm good at. What I would be good at is working with the Department of HHS and working with the county executive and getting doctors and professionals and people in this region together and figuring out what do we need to improve the situation. And then when they tell us what they need to improve the situation, we can go back as the executive and legislative branches and figure out how to get those funds, resources, zoning text amendments, grants, whatever it is, and make it happen.
Grant?
The buttons up here, I don't know what they do, so I'm trying to. So this is one of the reasons why an at-large council member is so important. because Montgomery County has rural communities. And the problem that we are describing is actually very common among rural communities across the United States of America. This lack of access to healthcare infrastructure and what that means for people's well-being. But that means that we need to have folks in governance who understand and are working and are thinking about how we create strong rural development plans for our rural communities. What does that look like in terms of making sure that dollars and resources are coming to places like Poolsville for infrastructure, whether we're talking about healthcare clinics and making sure that people have access both to telemedicine, but also to the times when you need to see somebody physically in person and you need to make sure that they can look at you and talk to you and understand what's going on. If we want to do things like telemedicine, how do we make sure that we have broadband infrastructure here in the Up County that is actually adequate and effective and will allow people to do that? So we really need to one of the reasons I'm excited to work at large is because it means that we can take that broader perspective and say, how do we make sure that we are building those partnerships with all of the different kinds of communities in Montgomery County and understanding and then addressing the specific concerns, again, that come with a place that has many rural communities here in Montgomery County.
Well,
Appreciate the question. I think I started my comments mentioning this issue right in the beginning. And one of the things I love about Montgomery County is that we are so diverse and we have a lot of different types of topography, as was mentioned. We really are a representation of microcosm of the United States. But with that comes challenges as well. Like, how do you deliver great, high quality service? How does everyone get to benefit from the great things here in Montgomery County? And that is a challenge. And in this area, in healthcare, it's a significant challenge. If you look at as I mentioned, the western side where we are here, in the northwestern side, you have significant health disparities, the worst in our county by zip code. If you look in the eastern part of the county, we have some of the worst health disparities. I remember when I was sitting on that side, I think Gabe mentioned it earlier, being grilled by Jerry and company about efforts to try to get a permanent, outpost, either Holy Cross. We have been working with them to be here to help address seniors and others who had to go to Germantown or Gaithersburg for service. Those efforts continue, but I think what we've committed to do at the high school, building this kind of co-location, I think that will help. That could be a potential outpost and maybe we could have some specialists kind of come in and out. But we have to be innovative, and I agree, it's a federal, state, and local issue. We can't do it all on our own. Healthcare is a human right, housing is a human right, and unfortunately, we have significant challenges here. I'm going to stay committed to this issue and make sure you get what you need.
Gabe?
So we need to build a community wellness center. We need to make sure there's an anchor organization such as Adventist or Holy Cross staffing it. We need to make sure that when the public health officer position is appointed, among the questions that we ask is ensuring that they have a definitive plan. Dr. Gale's coming up here to talk to you guys. There was a letter that was sent by the council, signed by me as chair of the HHS committee, asking him to come specifically to Poolsville to address the study, which alarmed all of us. And we have to have an all-in approach and a holistic approach to making sure that we take advantage of some of the technologies that we have. Telehealth, telemedicine do have some benefits, but we have to make sure we close the digital divide for people to be able to access that technology in the first place. And if Adventist or Holy Cross or Johns Hopkins doesn't have the resources to be able to underwrite the cost entirely themselves, then it's in the county's best interest to meet them part of the way, to help ensure that they provide the resources, not just a few days a week, but to have some degree of consistency, and that it includes pediatric and geriatric care, so that we can have a full service model in place of both prevention-based wellness programs, but also intervention-based wellness programs too.
Evan?
Quite frankly, it's unconscionable that Poolsville ranks last of all 36 zip codes. And there are only 2 doctors for 12,000 residents. One. Thank you.
Well, there's 2 actually. Well, in the same practice. There's 2.
They're in the same
In
practice,
the same practice.
2 doctors.
one practice.
Not much different, but.
That tells you how the need is.
That is the need.
It tells you the need.
And that's why I
He
highlighted,
hired another doctor.
right? And I'll reiterate, it's unconscionable. And what we need to do is make sure we have more mold units come here until we get that physical building in collaboration with one of our healthcare networks here in Montgomery County, which the chair of the HHS committee mentioned some of the larger ones. And I just want to take a moment to just thank the Fair Access Committee and all its members for your dogged advocacy since I was a candidate coming up here having these conversations. Progress is being made. I know the high school and the renovations and the expansions are not everything, doesn't include everything the community wanted, but progress is being made. And I think it's also important to recognize that over the last 2 years during this pandemic, we saw the inequities that exist in our community. And the last thing we can do is forget what we saw. And this study and the healthcare deserts that exist in our community, we have to recommit ourselves. I am fully committed to making sure that in the next term, we don't forget what we saw, we improve what we saw.
Thank you. So Lori, you will answer this one? The county is actually doing a new economic study or an economic plan for the economy. And if you look at it, a lot of it has to do with focusing on biotech and research facilities and attracting, frankly, larger companies to county, which is fine. But in our area, we actually are unique in the sense that most of the businesses here are family-owned, small, in many cases locally owned. So if you drove through the town, you'll see there are a number of storefronts that are not occupied. What can we do to encourage more small business growth, especially in Poolsville, but also countywide?
Thank you for that question. As the biotech corridor of the region, the city of Gaithersburg has really become innovative in how we attract and retain our businesses. And so these are the best practices I want to bring to Montgomery County. One thing we have is our toolbox grant. Our toolbox grant can provide up to $50,000 in assistance to businesses that want to grow or maintain their space. We were able to work with businesses, small businesses in our community who didn't qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program. We created our own, who couldn't navigate the confusing applications when the money ran out at the county level. We were able to support our businesses in the city. And so had we had more resources to commit to supporting our businesses, that's what we need to do. Our businesses are, especially our small businesses, are the biggest job creators in the county. It's the backbone of a thriving economy. And so while our big businesses have chambers to support them and to advise them on how to maintain their books, on how to maintain their workforce, we have to do a better job of creating innovation centers. We have to do a better job of working with the businesses that want to call Montgomery County home and finding out how we can prepare our workforce for those businesses. We have to be more strategic in our public-private partnerships and ensuring that our businesses have the resources they need to continue to grow and thrive.
Thank you, Scott.
So this is the third plan that we've discussed tonight. I think part of Montgomery County's economic development strategy is like paying people to write plans. And I say that half joking. So I started a small business 15 years ago, a residential property management company. We manage like single family homes throughout the capital region. We take care of about 700 properties and I have 14 employees. So Montgomery County suffers from two things, both a perception and a reality that we're a household business. So our neighboring jurisdictions, we've kind of stayed the same. Our neighboring jurisdictions have gotten much more competitive, which has left us behind in the reality of our competitiveness. And in the perception, you talk to 10 business people, I think 9 would say that the county feeling towards businesses is that it's more of a privilege as a business owner that for you to be able to operate here, then the county wants to be a partner in your success. So on the reality side, we need to do a much better job of figuring out what the pain points are for small businesses. And 96% of all private employees in the county are employed by a small business, which is defined as a company having 50 people or less. We need to find out the thousands of different places, because there's thousands of different types of businesses that the county's getting in their way. We need to get out of their way, and then we need to also ask them what they need to be successful. And then we need to actually change the county government's corporate culture to want to be true partners in their success.
Randy?
So to Scott's point, given that we are paying $400,000 to $500,000 for a lot of these plans, it's actually a travesty that we are getting that we are not getting the quality that we need in terms of engagement with community members who are directly impacted by those plans. And I think even when we talk about our competitiveness as a community, we're still measuring it by who gets to win the big business attraction shuffle. Meanwhile, our thousands of small businesses are feeling the pain, and they could absolutely tell us very clearly, and they do tell us when we go out and talk to them very clearly, what the things are that they are struggling with. We need to shift our economic development policies so that we're not just giving lip service to small business, but that we are redirecting resources to small business, that we are making sure that folks have access to capital, have access to commercial space, have support to navigate government regulations and have those processes simplified. And then they also have access to things like fair access to county procurement dollars, so that all the money that we spend on procurement is being redirected back into our local businesses. Because those are the folks who are employing the majority of our workers here in Montgomery County. And we have so many unique businesses, whether we are talking about locals, whether we're talking about Bassett's, whether we're talking about over in Darnestown, Wilnick Auto Body, these amazing, unique businesses where we have to start putting our money where our mouth is, because they are going to be the driver and the engine of our economic development. And if we don't pay attention to that and take it seriously, we will continue to lose.
Thank you. Will?
Appreciate the framing of the question. 90+% of our businesses are less than 50 people, 80+ are less than 15. It is the lifeblood of our economy. And during the pandemic, to both help them and also highlight the diversity of our economy, I highlighted a business every week called it Our Community, Our Businesses across the county. Locals was one of them. It was too hard to do. There were so many cool, innovative, great businesses here. And we do need to do more to support. One of the ways we support is by knowing who's here. Just this week, I had asked our Office of Legislative Oversight to study who are the businesses that are here, these small businesses. Who are they here? What is the composition? What field are they in? You have to know what you've got in order to support and outreach and retain and assist these businesses. And the report is unfortunately pretty damning. It's like, we don't know. There's not enough information, if I had to summarize. And it suggests some actions which we'll be following up on how to get better information. Because you gotta know who's here, if you're gonna help. I was proud to pass a, there we go. We got the Poolsville part. I'm gonna take that with me. I passed a procurement bill to the point it was made, $1 billion of procurement a year. I'm gonna pass the bill to make sure 30% goes to small businesses, and that we have a goal that 50% of the $10,000 or less purchases, which happen a lot, go to small businesses. We've got to track and make sure that's happening. I've also did a little bit of time on the holdup. So I'm gonna take 10 more seconds. And then we passed the first rental assistance for storefronts for businesses, the bill that I put forward during COVID. We have to do more to meet our folks at the point of their needs, get them information, have a culture of yes, and then identify and give them the support that they need, bottom up and middle. That's the way we need to do it. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Lynn. We've got to get White's Ferry open.
Yes.
We've already recently lost a restaurant, and I know probably more are hurting. And we also have to take advantage of the assets that we have. Poolsville Day is one of my favorite events across the entire year. It's a fantastic event. That should be a regional event. We should bringing more people to Poolsville as often as we can, and using all the tools that we have at our disposal within the county to highlight and promote these wonderful small businesses that are here. I got my MBA a long time ago, and one of the things that they teach you is that it costs a lot more to bring in a new customer than to keep the one you got. And our small local businesses need support to be able to meet their full potential. And we've lost too many family businesses since the beginning of the pandemic that just were not able to survive. Generational family businesses that were not able to survive. So this does have to be an area of emphasis, and I do agree with something that was said earlier, in streamlining and making it much more manageable to deal with our regulatory process, which can sometimes be a little overwhelming and difficult to navigate, and it shouldn't be difficult to navigate. We need to develop navigators, and we also need to spend more time up here, all of us, and including the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, which is supposed to be the arm that is supposed to be promoting the entire county, but I don't think does nearly enough for Coolsville.
Thank you. Evan?
I'm gonna be additive here, because I agree with everything that's been said. And let me pick up with Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. I think that they need to do a heck of a lot more. And there are gonna be some new board members that come on. The county executive has just nominated a number of folks. And so the council will have the opportunity to engage with them. And I hope that they come up here. I hope you invite them up here so they can see for themselves and hear directly from you what needs to be done. Because I think what MCEDC has focused on is bringing shiny new headquarters. And they've done a modest job on that, right? There are a number of success stories here in Montgomery County, which we don't do enough to tout. But underlying that is the fact that 96% of our businesses are small. And it is a cost-effective approach to make our small businesses medium-sized businesses. We should be focusing on that. The other side of the coin, as has been mentioned, is regulatory reform. You know, over the life of this county, there have been laws and regulations that have been passed that at the time of their passage had good intentions, I'm sure. But in this year 2022, I think we need to do a wholesale review of what has been passed and what might be stymieing growth and opportunity. Things that might have been passed decades ago that are now problematic, I think need another review, and that's what we should look at.
Tom?
This is a huge problem in Montgomery County, and if you want to take any Schadenfreude pleasure in this, this is not a Poolsville problem. This is a Montgomery County problem. Okay, we were the last jurisdiction in the region in job creation pre-COVID. During a huge national economic expansion, we lost 15,000 more jobs than any other jurisdiction during COVID. Most of those held by women and people of color because of the industries that were affected, and we've lost more jobs post-COVID as we're coming out of COVID than any other jurisdiction, which is insane. We lost 38% of all the job loss in Maryland, just in Montgomery County, in the second half of 2021. That makes no sense. If you want to solve complicated problems, you know, the first thing is build on our strengths. And the great thing is we have a great number of small businesses and a wonderful entrepreneurial culture. We have such a talented population and more people want to start a small business than almost any county in the nation. But the fact is it costs more to start a small business in Montgomery County. It carries too much risk and it takes too long to start a small business and make it succeed in Montgomery County. In other jurisdictions, they have tiger teams that come in. They don't treat you like you're a supplicant that, as Scott said, is doing us a favor if you start a small business. They treat you like somebody who is doing us, who's acting in the public interest if you're creating jobs and making investments. They have one person to work with you to get your permits, one person to get your commercial lease, one person to help you access grants and loans, and they take you through the whole process with deadlines to make sure you succeed. We don't do that. We need to do that because that's key to restoring economic development in Montgomery County. We also have to do that for WSSC and the planning department as well, not just the county government. Thank you.
If you don't mind, we're supposed to end at 7:30, but I'd like to have one more question, and then if we have a little 15 more minutes at the end, each of you have 2-minute statements to kind of summarize, would that be okay? So one more question, we'll start with Scott. And before I do that, I just wanted to mention, in terms of the issues you raised with the economic development, Jim and I just met with the tourism board for the county. And it was a great meeting, but I gotta say, they really didn't know a lot about some of the things that are going on out here. So your point is exactly right. There's a lot of opportunity. Jim calls it the hub and spokes, but there's a lot of things going on out here, like the grape cut facility, like Landman. All these things are coming together at a time where you can actually encourage people to come out here, see what the ag reserve is all about, actually help economic growth, but not create development. And it's really a great opportunity. I think it's actually happening now. So Scott?
Could I ask a quick question about time? Because I think if each of us gave 2-minute statements,
Yes.
it's gonna take us straight to 7:45.
Right, is that okay?
That clock. Do you want us to do another question in addition to that?
That was, if that's okay.
Past
Is that okay with the audience? We'll just have one more question and then we'll end at 7:45 or
I'll stay as late as you can stay.
something. So one final question I want to ask is about the SROs and the security in the schools. It's one of the issues that's gotten raised at the last debate, the last two debates we had. We did have SROs in the schools, they were taken out. I know there's been recent legislation passed to have a new police presence. I'm not really clear what it is exactly. What is your position on security in the schools and specifically in legislation as well?
So we have this community engagement officer 2.0 program. I believe a memorandum of understanding was signed in April. My current position is very definitive. It's wait and see. Let's see if this works. It just got started. The superintendent, the police chief, a number of police departments in the county and the school system just came up with this. School just ended, as we all know, and let's see if it works, but let's keep on top of it, because we want our schools to be safe. We want our kids to be safe too, and we want to make sure they are comfortable and in an optimum environment for learning.
Ben?
So as I said earlier, I'm committed to centering the voices of our young people when they tell us what they need in terms of safety. I'm also committed to centering what works. And sorry, we've just seen in Uvalde, Texas, that the presence of police officers does not ensure safety. But what our young people have been telling us is that there are deep supports that they need around their wellness. There are deep supports that they need around dealing with stress. There are deep supports that they need around dealing with negative experiences related to policing and discipline in schools that are actually what they need to ensure their safety and to make sure that we can much more effectively address at the root the challenges that we are seeing around school violence. It might feel comfortable to us as adults to say that we want more police in there, but it's not actually effective. And quite frankly, every single one of us in this room, I think, grew up with a much lower police presence. And we know that schools can be managed and that we can be safe in our schools when we are treated as human beings, as young people, not as potential criminals. And that is how our students are feeling right now with the increased police presence. And I think if we are going to talk seriously about school safety, we have to listen to what our young people are telling us about what actually keeps them safe and helps them feel like they are supported to thrive.
Well,
Yeah, so this, just so people know what's happening, because I think it's important to know what's actually going on. CEO 2.0 is in place. There's a new MOU where the officers have an office space. They're not supposed to be involved in discipline. They were not supposed to be involved in discipline before, but there's a much higher focus on it. There's a much higher focus on the data. One of the reasons that students organized for over 2 years, and I was very supportive of these efforts and introduced legislation on budget amendments to support them, was that 50% of the students arrested over the last 4 years were students of color and students, and if we added in, or African American students rather, if we added in Latino students, it's 75%, disproportionately students with disabilities, students of color. You dug into the arrest, which I've done. You could think for things like disruption, low-level drug possession. There's obviously an issue with guns. There's more guns than people in the United States, so that's a huge issue, and the police should be called when guns are in schools. But what I have always advocated for is for holistic solutions. We have full-time security, and we need to make sure they're more professionally trained and more robust. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate vestibules in all the schools so that people can't get directly into the schools. 2010 Secret Service report talks about how that's more effective at preventing mass shootings than anything else. And then we need to invest in some of the supports we talked about earlier. It's unconscionable to me that we would have a police officer in every high school but not a school psychologist, which is the case today. We need to have the social workers. We need to invest in restorative justice. There are other ways, more effective ways, to have trusted adults in buildings that reduce violence and interpersonal conflict, root causes, which is what we all want, children to be safe. So I think we have to look at the data and keep monitoring this, and this will be an ongoing conversation.
Gabe?
So this is not an either or. We need to certainly enhance, support all the wellness-based programs, the prevention-based programs, the after-school programs that we lost during the pandemic, in which a caring adult engages a child and asks them how their day was. We need all of that, but we also need to reflect the reality of the situation on the ground. Montgomery County Police were called to our schools more than 4,000 times this year. We have had over 500, last year, throughout the entire year, there were over 500 guns confiscated in Montgomery County in the act of crime. So far, 6 months into this year, it's 748. And so law enforcement is going to be on campuses at schools because of the level of violence that we are seeing within those schools. And I think it benefits all of us to make sure there is a reasonable and authentic and trusted relationship between those law enforcement officials and the administrations of those schools, but also the faculty, the staff, and the families that go to those schools. And I understand this moment that we are in, and that for too many of our students, seeing a uniformed police officer elicits fear, which is totally unacceptable. But we also have to recognize that the violence that we are seeing is real. And I think the community engagement officer approach is an appropriate one and will need to be evaluated throughout the entire school year to ensure that it is in fact successful, because it tries to address the balance of needs that we see before us today.
Evan?
When this conversation started a number of years ago about removing SROs, the question I asked was, what fills the bank? Recognizing that we need our kids to feel safe, we need our teachers to feel safe. And that term means different things to different people. But when we removed the SROs, it did create a vacuum. There was a mental health crisis that's in our midst. And last year, I offered in the budget to add a clinical licensed social worker at every high school. And that did not pass the council. And when we came back to school in September physically, after nearly a year and a half of being gone, our kids were in mental duress. And we've seen, not only here in Montgomery County, we've seen across the country what's happened. And we need to recommit ourselves to placing social workers, healthcare professionals in our schools. And we need to ensure that law enforcement can come in when there are real crimes that occur. It's both and, but we ultimately need to make sure that our kids and teachers feel safe. And we're working our way through this, but we need to make sure that we deploy more mental health supports to all of our kids as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Tom.
That's absolutely right. SROs get all the, attention. We have to keep in mind, the goal is security and not SROs. We have to take a preventative approach to preventing violence in our schools. So number one, I fully agree with Evan. I try to get, as I mentioned, one social worker in every high school in this budget. Eventually, at the end of the budget, end of the year, we got enough funding for 50 mental health professionals in our high schools and middle schools. We need more than one in many of them that have over, we have high schools with over 3,000 students coming out of a pandemic. Number two, we need more school security officers, not necessarily SROs. We have principals that have been asking for school security officers for a long time, and they can't get them from MCPS. I just had to intervene to get a full-time one at MCPS. Blair High School, which has grown dramatically and has the same number of school security officers. And third, we need to really focus on getting guns out of our schools, identifying them, and identifying the kids that are at risk at bringing them in. And fourth, we need clearer rules about when, now that we are in this program where SROs are back in the schools, SEOs are back in the schools 2.0, we need clearer rules about when they can be called in. Because if you talk about, many of our officers and many principals, they will say that so many of these calls are because there's an over-reliance on them. And that they, if we're gonna have them, they should only be used for the most serious, and that there shouldn't be an over-reliance on them.
Lauren.
When we're talking about school safety, we have to look at the root causes. Why are kids coming into school to disrupt a classroom? Why are they not ready to learn? Why are our classrooms overcrowded? Why do our educators have 35 plus students with no supportive staff in the classroom? Why don't we have people on staff that can relax and calm and engage our students in a myriad of ways, not just in the classroom and not just during disciplinary actions, but all throughout their days, a positive influence. You know, having our officers sit in a classroom all day until they are called upon will only cause backup with what's happening with solving cases. We had 2 police-involved shootings in the city of Gaithersburg, and it took almost 2 years for the cases to be resolved. Like, our officers went to school, they have bachelor's degrees, and they should not be babysitting our children. We need to ensure that we fund our schools with the appropriate resources to ensure that as we are transitioning to safer and more innovative ways to protect and to preserve an educational facility, that we are putting in the structures that don't involve, disciplinary actions or an utilization of officers in institutions of learning. We need to ensure that those resources are better utilized through recruiting and retaining our mental health providers and after-school resources. And so if they are in the classrooms, I hope that we are utilizing them in more productive ways.
Thank you. So we're gonna close now with 2-minute comments from each of you, and you can address whatever you want to address to the audience. I do want to say, just personal, that this has been a really informative debate. I gotta say that you guys have really done a good job, and I also want to thank you for coming out. And one other thing, in terms of the privilege of the chair, I'll take a second to, one of the guys here tonight is Bob Sissel, who, as you know, represents the agricultural producers out here. And you may not know, this is a fact you probably don't know, but inflation's 8%, but producer input costs are up 25%. So just a thing to keep in mind here, that the cost of inflation and fuel especially affect our farmers greatly. Frederick County actually has a program, believe it or not, I think it's $2 million that they set aside. We need it necessarily, but I just wanted you to know that, we have some costs up here that are unique, again, because of the land reserve. So Randy, 2 minutes, each of you to closing comments.
So I really want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you so much to the town commission. Thank you so much to Fair Access. Thank you so much to the chamber for hosting this conversation and for some amazing questions. In closing, I think the main thing that I want to say is that there are 2 things that really guide how I operate as an organizer and an advocate in my community, and how I want to operate as a council member. And the first is that we are the best experts on our lives and on how policy impacts us. I think this is a critical thing for us to remember, because as a policymaker, I am not going to know everything. And anyone who tells you that they do is not telling you the truth. But what I do know is that when I want to understand the particular experiences that folks are having in their communities, the particular ways that existing or potential policy decision is going to impact them, that I have to go and I have to deeply engage with folks around what their real lived experience is and what the questions are that they need answered by public policy decision making, and then invite them actually deep into that process of setting that agenda, of crafting the solutions, and of monitoring and evaluating and holding us accountable to making sure that we get the outcomes that we said we wanted. The second piece is that I believe that we are capable of governing together. Montgomery County is a microcosm of the United States. And we need to be able to demonstrate, not just for ourselves, but quite frankly, for our whole country at this point, that we have the ability to look at one another with empathy, with appreciation for the diversity of our communities and our lived experiences, to recognize our interdependence, and to come together to build solutions that support each and every one of us to thrive. That's my goal, that's my mission, that's what I want to bring to the council, and I really am excited about the conversation that we've had today. Thank you so much.
Will?
Thank you, Mike, thank you to the entire town. This is great, the indomitable Bob Sissel, and the producers. It's really great, always great to be up here, because it's a reminder of just how awesome Montgomery County is. And, when I ran 4 years ago, I talked about the Montgomery County promise. Like making sure everyone in this county had a great school, a safe neighborhood, a job that paid a living wage, somewhere that they could retire with dignity and afford to live here. Those things are available to many. in Montgomery County, but we know they're not available to all. And we've talked about some of the reasons here in Poolsville, there's some gaps. And I've dedicated my life to closing those gaps. You know, as a civil rights attorney, as a policy professional, and I think we've made some significant progress in the last 4 years that I've been proud to lead in the midst of a difficult time with COVID. We set up hubs that didn't exist prior to COVID, and now there are 8 across the county. We did a public-private partnership called Food for Montgomery, where we're taking food from our farms, getting them right to the table. We're helping our restaurants survive. We're creating this beautiful ecosystem. Food Council just celebrated 10 years the other day, and I know some of my colleagues were able to be at that. I really think that Montgomery County is the place where we can get it right. We can show how to live in a place that's diverse in every way, where everyone has what they need to thrive and to live out their full potential. We've got a lot of work to do to get there. We talked about it tonight. But I think what we need on the council as we expand is people who have a record of getting it done and can bring others together to push even further. I think I've done that. I'd like to come back and continue to do it. Appreciate your support and appreciate all your work here in Colesville. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Gabe?
Thanks, Lynn. So whenever I turn on 107 from 28, I always feel my stress level decrease a little bit. Even more now that Jerry's retired. This is a special place on a lot of different levels. It truly is. And I love this community. I love what you are about. I love what you stand for. I love your leadership, and I respect it. And if my parents didn't live 2 miles from us and my in-laws didn't live 3 doors from us, this is a place I would want to be raising my family. And so we need to do everything we can as a government to support all of you. And we still have a long way to go, but there have been tremendous assets that have been applied just in the last couple of years. Crossvines is going to be a game changer. Truly, it's going to be a regional destination spot and also significantly support our agricultural reserve in a way that will be extraordinary. Poolsville High School is already one of the best high schools in the state, frankly, one of the best high schools in the country. And now we're going to have a facility that meets the actual criteria and the standards that have been set by the students and the faculty and staff. We got to build that wellness center, and I promise you, Jim, I'm going to work on putting a cover over that pool one day so that we can make it a real facility, because that would be fantastic as well. So I know I don't need a GPS to get here. I will be here many more times over the course of the second term, and I will be working on those public health issues, because that will be among my highest priorities, both as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, but also just as somebody who admires this community. So thank you all very much for organizing all of this in your leadership.
Thank you. Evan?
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to the Commission, Fair Access, and the Chamber for a really good conversation. I started by saying I've enjoyed this campaign cycle with these friends and colleagues because we were all additive. And 7 might seem like a lot for a conversation, but we show, the diversity of thought, the diversity of opinion, but quite frankly, we all are in agreement with what we need to do and where we need to go. And serving in the first term, my policies and things I've been working on are all about making sure Montgomery County is more fair and equitable for everybody. And in the first 4 years, having conversations with all of you, we saw the inequitable policy regarding Poolsville High School. And we worked on it. And we remain to see, or we continue to see, the inequitable healthcare outcomes. And that's work to be done. And you've heard from me and my colleagues about moving forward and what has to be done. I'll say it again, we cannot unsee the inequities that we have seen, particularly with regard to the pandemic. There's also much more opportunity to unleash the economic potential of this community and the ag reserve, whether it is continued reforms within our liquor and beer and wine and spirits industry, or as I shared earlier, allowing more of our farms to take on-farm composting so that we can reduce our waste management, we can close the Dickerson incinerator, and we can unleash green entrepreneurial businesses like Compost Crew and Veteran Compost. And I'll end by saying that it is my honor to have the support of our teachers, the Sierra Club, our realtors, and what might seem a disparate group are all supporting me because I'm always accessible. I'm always in the community. And whenever anyone has any concerns, they know they can contact me and we'll work on it. And so I hope I can have your support. I look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks to the Fair Access Coalition and everybody that put this together. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope tonight gave you a sense of my approach. Having been a community organizer for many years, a nonprofit executive director, and then an elected official at both the state and the county level. My approach is always do your homework, learn the issues, listen to people who are the most affected, help them bring forward the solutions they want to see, understand and address the barriers, and bring people together to identify the common ground and get difficult things done. I was elected twice by my colleagues unanimously the last 2 years to serve as the vice president and the president of the council to lead us through incredibly difficult 2 years. The worst recession since the Great Depression, the worst public health crisis since the flu of 1918. And we still, when that year was over, performed better than nearly all the 3,000 other counties in the nation. The next council, you will have at least 5 or 6 new members. You will also have a new local council member for Poolsville, right? You're no longer District 1, you're in District 2. Great relationships with the folks running in District 2, no matter who gets elected. But it's also critical that you have experienced, effective leadership as your at-large council members who can fight for your interests in Annapolis, have great relations with our federal delegation, and who can bring people together to get things done and have a track record, have the experience of it and a track record of doing that. Look, we learned lots of lessons the last 2 years. I want to come back to the council to apply the lessons that we learned. I saw them all up close. We can take advantage of the opportunities we have, the lessons we learned to build a county that's healthier and stronger and fairer than the county we inherited pre-COVID. But we need experienced people back on the council to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So I want to start by thanking the local municipality, Poolsville. I want to thank Fair Access. Being up here as one of the only council members, one of the only ones from a municipality, I know that local government is where the rubber meets the road. And so having served with Jerry, as vocal as Jerry was, we got things done under his leadership. And so ensuring that tax duplication, we bring more money back to the resources. These are the best practices I want to continue should I earn your vote to be your next council member at large. Starting with strengthening our commitment to education from cradle to career and beyond. It's not just for our early childhood learners, but it's for our seniors who still want to make meaningful contributions to our community. It's making a living in our county more affordable so that we can not just celebrate homes for our heroes here, but we're also celebrating homes for everyone, for all incomes. We need to ensure that agriculture remains preserved in this community. That's what it was set aside for. And as an Up County resident, I'm going to ensure that I'm a vocal, dogged advocate for this part of our county. I know the amenities here are so precious, and what we can do is unimaginable, the opportunities that exist moving forward. We have to ensure that we revitalize our economy. Small businesses have called this community home. Small businesses like locals, like places where they can sell their wares, where they can grow their own food and bring it straight to the community. We need to ensure that that continues. And transportation challenges like the White's Ferry, we need to ensure that we're modeling the leadership of this community as the electric car, designation. I'm so excited to have the electric cars prioritized here. And these are the sort of innovations that we can have with the right leadership. And so I thank you for your time and look forward to having your support.
Thank you, Scott.
So I just want to thank everyone for putting this on, and thanks for arranging this spectacular weather. It's pretty amazing. And thanks to whoever left their phone here out and sending international texts. The entire debate, so I appreciate that. from a national level all the way down to the local level, for some reason, politics can bring out the worst in us, and it can pit neighbor against neighbor. And why I'm running for office is a deep sense of public service, but also a very unique skill set, and the ability to, when we have these in-depth conversations and debates, and sometimes when we disagree, we can do it in a respectful way, and we can do it where when the debate is over, we're not only gonna be civil, but we're gonna be friendly to each other. And maybe we'll even be friends too. So in the last couple of years, a bunch of billionaires decided they can fly planes really high up in the air and call it space travel. But 50 years ago, human beings said, we're gonna land a person on the moon, and we did. So we've been talking a lot about problems here on Earth this evening. And if we go into these debates and conversations and problem solving sessions, knowing that we will find the solution, there's nothing that we can't solve. We can get more doctors up here and more specialists up here. We can figure out how to get Whites Ferry open, or how to make transportation a solvable entity up here to improve the economy. All of these things can be done as long as we believe that we can do them. So next month, if you haven't gotten your mail-in ballot already, you have 8 great choices to choose from in the county council at large race. You have up to 4 votes that you can cast. I am asking that you cast one of them for me. Thank you guys again, and this was a terrific conversation.
It was due to all of you, so thank you for coming out, I really appreciate it.
That was it, again.
One last thing, guys, you gotta get your pictures. Yeah.